So Duncan asked me to talk about why Advent is significant for me. And I feel I should start with an apology, which is that I think when Duncan asked me, he had in mind that I had some sort of deep theological reasoning for the significance of Advent. And in one sense, I kind of do. But really the reason I love Advent, the real reason, is because I just love this season. I love the magic of the season. I love the lights, like we put our tree up in November, way before Advent. I love the red cups, the smell of gingerbread. I love the songs. I love all of it. Everything about it is great. The magic of the season, and really I've been that way since a kid. I remember I would put up my Christmas decorations in my bedroom when the autumn internationals, the rugby autumn internationals were on, which was November, and I would take them down again just as the Six Nations was starting, sort of like rugby to rugby. So that's like November through to February, I'd have decorations up. I just loved everything about the season. But I guess it's right that as I've got older and the more I've read and the more I've spent around wise people, the more I've come to see the rich significance of this story, of this time of Advent, for our faith, this time of preparation and waiting. Moses has to wait in the desert until he hears again from God many, many years later. Joseph waits 13 years in prison for his dream that God has given him to come true. Abraham is 100 years old when God gives him a son. Jacob has to wait 14 years, 7 plus 7 years, to finally be with the one that he loves. And then we have in Luke's gospel, just before the story of Jesus' birth, or just after I should say the stories of Jesus' birth, we have these stories of these old wise people, Simeon and Anna, who have been waiting years and years and years, faithfully turning up, praying every day in the temple, waiting for God's Messiah to appear. And then they both have the privilege of seeing this baby boy born, of seeing and holding this baby boy, this gift of God to them that they've been waiting all this time for. Advent is a season of waiting, and really what Advent is about is preparing us as Christians for what it is to wait for God's new creation, his new reality to come. So at Advent we're doing two things really. We're waiting for Christmas. In other words, we're waiting to remember God's first coming, his arrival. And Advent actually means arrival or coming. We're waiting for that celebration of when God came as a baby boy. But we're also doing something else. We as Christians believe that God didn't just come once, but that he's going to come again. And so we're waiting expectantly for God to come again, for Jesus to return, for the second arrival, the second coming. And so really, in one sense, we're in this time of Advent, but as Christians, we believe our whole lives and the whole of life until Jesus comes again is an Advent, a waiting for Jesus to return. So really what this season is, this December, is doing, is preparing us for what it means to live as a Christian. To live, in other words, in the world now, whilst waiting for the world that is to come. All of those longings that you have, all of those desires, whether it's for racial justice, whether it's for the radical inequalities that we've seen in this nation through this corona season, to be ended, to be done away with. Whether it's a particular longing for you, for a family, for a partner, whatever your longing is, your deep longing, that's how we live as Christians in this world, waiting for God's good future to arrive. And so Advent traditionally for the Christian church has been this time of preparation, of waiting. And I just want to say two things about what that waiting looks like. The first thing to say is that when you look through the scriptures and through Christian tradition, this waiting for God to do his thing again is never a passive waiting. You know, talking about waiting can make it seem like we just sort of sit back, we relax, and we wait for it to happen. But if you think about how you wait for Christmas, really waiting for Christmas is about preparation. You get the tree, you put up the lights, you get the kids to write their letters to Santa and they go and post them in the post box. You do all the things, you prepare for the Christmas services, getting ready for this thing that's about to happen. And that's no different for us as Christians. And so in the Christian tradition, this time of Advent has really been about the disciplines, developing new disciplines of waiting. There is going to be a good future, but here and now, we're just waiting. And it's hard to wait. And so it's been a time of maybe fasting, maybe taking up a new prayer discipline. It's never been quite as rigorous as Lent. Lent is the sort of hardcore, if you like, waiting, preparation time, ready for Easter, the fasting. Whereas this is a time that's much more about prayer, discipline, quiet waiting, expectancy for Christmas to come, with this slight sort of thrill rising up within us. And when you think about Simeon and Anna in Luke's Gospel, who turned up, like I say, every day to pray at the temple, waiting expectantly for God to come. They had heard of God, they had heard from God, and they were waiting for what he had said to them to be fulfilled. So wait expectantly, wait actively, pray, maybe find a new discipline in this season. And the second thing that I really wanted to say is that this waiting doesn't end in just a kind of general fulfillment of happiness. The waiting that we're longing for God to come again will fill us and complete us in such a way that we can't even begin to imagine. I said earlier that I, as a kid, prepped Christmas for a long time. Christmas for me lasted a good few months there, and it started back in November. Well, I remember this one year, and I don't know how old I was, I think it was probably about 11 or 12. I think probably about 11, just about to go into secondary school. So I should have known better, but I'd prepared for Christmas for such a long time. And then I remember on the day itself, Christmas arrived. And I remember just breaking down in the middle of the day. I just lay on my bed and I cried, and I had no idea why. I had no idea what was going on inside of me, but I just wept. I cried, and people were trying to console me. What was the problem? And I couldn't articulate what the problem was. And really, looking back, I realized what was going on was the reality of the day could not possibly live up to the amount of preparation and waiting that had gone into it. It just couldn't live up to it. And so, no matter how great the food was, no matter how great the presents was, and I probably got great presents that year, they simply couldn't live up to the expectancy, the hope that I had invested in this day. And I just broke down and wept. When Christ returns, when the second advent happens, we will be filled in such a way that every desire within us, all of those hopes, all of those longings will be met. And we can't even begin to imagine what that will feel like. To be without hunger, without desire, but to have all of those desires utterly fulfilled. To see Jesus face to face, to have him look at us and say to you, "You are my beloved child, well done, faithful servant." To hug us, to hold us, to have all of that fulfilled. That is what we are waiting for. That is where the waiting will lead us. So, brothers and sisters in Christ, be very, very blessed this Advent season. Enjoy it all, not just the spiritual bits, but all of it, every part of this preparation for Christmas. Eat, drink, and be merry when it comes. And remember that God's good future is breaking in. And until that day, we wait patiently for it. Amen.